frankly, everybody that works at a gym or runs a gym are really frontline healthcare workers that should be seen that way.
70% of adults now qualify as obese. That's up from 40%. And for adults over 70, that number approaches 80%. Wellness has become the new anchor. So when you think about, some clubs before were looking at fatigue as an anchor. I think wellness is now what really people are looking at as an anchor.
How do we make sure that what a ring is reporting is the same as what a watch is reporting, is the same as what a treadmill is telling you? And how do we get sort of all the manufacturers on the same page?
Welcome to this week's episode of Lifts. I'm Matthew Januszek, and I'm here with my co-host Mo Iqbal. Mo, you are totally the opposite side of the world today. What's it like down
literally the opposite side of the world. Yeah, we're recording this. I'm in Sydney, Australia. And Matthew, and along with a guest, you both are on opposite coasts, but it's been quite the trip. I'm here for South by Southwest in Sydney, and I'm really excited. I'll be speaking and doing a presentation along with Amber Taylor, who I've known for a long time from Les Mills. One of my colleagues, Emmett, from ABC Fitness. We'll be talking about a really cool topic, which is psychology and AI in fitness. So we're excited for it, and really happy to be in what I think is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I just went for a run this morning, and just running outside the Sydney Harbor is just beautiful.
Very good. I'm very excited about this. For years, I've followed these reports, and Mo and I had a little bit of a backwards and forwards as we were preparing for it today, and I mistakenly called it IHRSA. It's one of those things I still can't get out of my head. I don't know if I'm on my own on that front, but I've been, as long as I've been in the industry, which is sort of 25 plus years, I've always looked forward to these reports that come out to see what's happening in the industry and who's growing. And this year this report was also pretty interesting to see what's happened. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the crew from Health and Fitness Association and talk through the report.
See, that wasn't that hard, was it, Matthew?
No, he didn't. Well, no, you're right, Matt. It is a special edition because a conversation on this report, which look, we've seen reports for many, many years, but this one's special because it's about this conversation we're about to have defines where our industry goes next, and it's really forward-looking. And today we're joined by two people who are leading that charge: Liz Clark, the president of Health and Fitness Association, formerly called IHRSA, and Anton, who is Health and Fitness Association's VP of Research. And if you're not familiar with HFA, formerly called IHRSA, it is the global trade and advocacy body for health and fitness. It formerly, as I mentioned, was called IHRSA. It represents over 150,000 health clubs and 230 million members worldwide, which is just massive. HFA is really focused now on driving policy, promoting data transparency, publishes reports like the ones that we're about to talk about. It helps operators, investors, government agencies to understand the economic and public health impact of physical activity. And at the helm of that is someone who I call my neighbor, because she literally lives less than a mile away from me when I'm back at home in Arlington, is Liz Clark. Liz Clark is, if you don't know her, is a powerhouse. She's little, but she's big in her voice and in her impact. And she's really, she took over HFA, I think, Liz, in 2021, and you've really rebuilt the organization, reinvented it, gave it a new identity post-pandemic. You've also, I would say, repositioned it more from a trade group that puts on trade events to what I'm looking at is really a global public health partner. So Liz, Anton, welcome to Lifts.
Thanks for having us. I'm excited about this today.
Great to be here.
There's certainly a long list of things that we wanted to talk about, but one of the things that came in literally a few minutes before the podcast started was a new study that came out, and I thought this, although it's not really related to the report, it is related to the industry we're in. So I thought, without sort of putting you off guard too much, I just thought I'd start with this, and essentially it's about this study that came out this week, which expanded the clinical definition of obesity. And overnight, nearly 70% of Americans now fall into the category, up from 40%. And so I was curious, from your vantage point, leading the global fitness industry, how should we interpret this? Is this a crisis, a reclassification, or perhaps maybe a wake-up call about how the fitness industry and the medical industry could and should be working together?
I think that it's fair to say that this is a crisis, and it's a crisis of greater consequence than we've ever seen before. We've known that we've been in crisis mode for many years as an unhealthy nation, and continuing to get more obese is problematic, especially for children, and what that means. So one thing that we're trying to do here at the association is to change the narrative and change the way that we talk about what it is that our industry does. And exactly to your point, Matthew, working closer with the medical community, because one of the things that I've been saying since I got in this role is that we are preventative healthcare. And frankly, everybody that works at a gym or runs a gym are really frontline healthcare workers that should be seen that way. So for me to see scary numbers like that, I think it's something that we need to work together on. Anton can talk a little more about his perspective from the overall data, but I'll tell you, even just this morning, we were on a call with the World Health Organization and talking about how we continue to be working closer and closer to make sure that this narrative is being heard by the right people, and then ultimately being able to create the policies and implement them to really make a difference.
Yeah, and I would just say, I did briefly read the study you were referring to there, Matt, and I would just say that unfortunately this is one in another piece in the puzzle of a long row of research that we see come out that highlight dire public health metrics, right? So obesity is certainly being one, but we also see increased rates of everything from cancers to declining mental health status of both adults and adolescents. And we know, right, that physical exercise and structured exercise is a key part of the solution to a lot of these public health crises. And so we are committed to certainly highlighting the data, the evidence-based backing that we know is out there to help promote, protect, and grow our industry. And that is something we do on a daily basis.
With this new standard that has been now endorsed by the American Heart Association, this is crazy, but 70% of adults now qualify as obese. That's up from 40%. And for adults over 70, that number approaches 80%. So what's different, it's not that people got obese overnight, but it's really how they define what obesity is, which I kind of like. The new definition includes metabolic dysfunction, inflammation, and body composition markers, not just BMI. So for years, us in the industry were really critical of BMI. BMI is not a really good indicator of health and wellness, but that's how we've defined obesity. Now it's taking these other three markers, which I think are really important. That's just not semantics. I mean, this is a seismic shift. It means that almost 230 million Americans are now considered metabolically unhealthy. We've never seen a number like that before. I think it's really fitting because it hits at the exact moment of this year's HFA report where you call fitness essential, not optional. I really loved how you've framed that. So Liz, question to you is if you could capture the headline of the 24-25 report, what would it be?
We're in crisis, and it's our responsibility to address it however we can. And I think everybody with the different modalities that all encompass this entire industry, which I know that we'll talk about that later, but how does everything from not only just a strength and weight training, a cardio workout impact this crisis, but is there science around other pieces of this industry? Is there science around recovery of cryo, red light, stretching, yoga, Pilates? I think all of that is going to be really interesting, but everybody needs to be part of the solution. We need to realize that this is a crisis together, that that is fixable if we're willing to help lead.
Generally, when I've read the report, it has seemed as though a lot of the information comes from the US. I guess with that being one of the biggest markets in the world, it's obvious why that would happen. But probably just as a start point, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the international side of the business and the report, to get your views on what were some of the sort of surprising data that came back from the international business that may be different to what you're seeing in the US, if anything.
I think there's a lot, and I think Anton can answer that in a second. I'll just say that similar to Mo, I've also been a road warrior in the last few weeks as well, and spending a lot of time internationally talking about our global report, sharing key findings from it. We were recently in Amsterdam for our European Congress event, followed by Dubai and the Middle East and PHIT and a conference there. So really interesting data and stats about penetration rates that, again, Anton's much closer to sort of the key interesting findings, but there certainly are many. And ones that I know that in these markets around the world are very interested to see, but then also challenging themselves to improve, which is, I think, a great message. But maybe, Anton, if you want to share some of the more of the highlighted data, that'd be great.
Yeah. No, I mean, as you note, Matt, I mean, the U.S. market is, from its position as the foremost markets in the world, like, has I wouldn't say like an outsized role in how we talk about the industry, but probably like an appropriate size, the impact it has. But I think the story that comes through from our work going into the global report is really one of a global industry that's currently in a period of both resilient growth, optimism, and transformation, and that really carries through all continents of the world. Like, so the global report basically covers a selection of 30 markets around the world, and it varies like what sort of data we have access to in various markets, but for all the countries where we do have comparable year-over-year data, we did see a robust growth in key metrics, such as industry revenue was up between 5 to 11% across these group of markets, like with a median of 8%. Facility counts were also up by 4% on average. Memberships was up by 6%, and when you take that research with some of the other data that we put out, for example, 2 weeks ago we put out our fitness industry benchmarking report that kind of looks at key operational and financial metrics and kind of provide benchmarks. We see that again, like across the board, we are in a period of having a very healthy industry where, again, like average revenue growth is close to 10%, both in the US and internationally as well. And so while we tend to talk a lot about the US market, it is important to highlight that there are a lot of very healthy markets out there. I mean, UK, Germany, and Europe, for example, like are kind of like the number 2 and number 3 markets when it comes to both memberships and industry revenue, but also, right, there is another part of the story, which is the huge potential and untapped potential that's still out there. So take, for example, the country of India, where we recently published an extensive market report in collaboration with Deloitte. So this is a market that has a membership penetration rate of less than 1%. Still, they're generating about $2 billion USD per year in revenue, and it's the penetration there is expected to double by the end of this decade. Similarly, we see in countries like Japan, Saudi Arabia, Brazil that have penetration rates around like 5, 6, 7%, still generating $2 to $3 billion in revenue each year. So there is a lot of momentum. There's a lot of optimism in this industry, but there's also a lot of potential for continued growth going forward.
We constantly keep on talking about how we feel like this year is one of the most optimistic years. And just looking at this report here, one, I think it's just really nicely done and thorough. Gym penetration in the US hit 24.9% in the US with record highs across Europe and the Asia Pacific. And I know, Liz, you and I talked about your goal of wanting to hit 30% by 2030, which is awesome and ambitious. But there's a clear cultural shift. Fitness, I think, is now really being seen, at least in more developed nations, as part of the healthcare continuum. Globally, this report tracks 250 million active members, 77 million in the US, 72 million in Europe. And you've seen, as you mentioned, Anton, double-digit growth in Latin America, Asia. I think India with under 1%, I think you mentioned in the report, is 0.8% penetration, gives you decades of runway for sustained growth. So even though we may think that certain markets are close to peak in the near term, there's a lot of opportunity. And I don't think this is a short-term rebound, right? I think from the whole, one of the interesting things about the report is revenue per member, and I think you touched on that, Anton, is up 17%. I think that's correct, since 2019. You've got churn is down. And then additionally, members are engaging across multiple categories. As you see gyms add more services from digital, recovery, nutrition, members are spending more money, spending more time, and more engaged with the brands. And I think that was really a really welcoming thing to see, because I know the industry's been pushing for that for a long time.
Yeah. And I think an important kind of point of context here to note as well, right, that a lot of this growth that we're seeing and that we've seen since the end of the pandemic has happened against the backdrop of quite challenging macroeconomic environment, right, with high inflation rates and a regulatory and policy environment that hasn't always been the most favorable. So this growth is happening in spite of that, and that really speaks to like how consumers are rethinking their relationship with exercise, right? That this is not a discretionary spending that's subject to cuts in a tough economic environment. Like this is core to who they are. This is increasingly core to like their core spending, household spending, and increasingly it's also being seen as core to their health and their healthcare.
And if I can just add to that, Anton, I think this does reflect, if you look at some of the older data studies that came out a year or two ago, that was finally we're seeing people are working out first and foremost for their mental health. I think that is a huge change in where this industry was founded, and people are prioritizing their mental health. I think we are seeing really interesting developments coming up with the younger generation, a sort of a sober, curious generation, if you will. Kids that would rather go to the gym than go to a bar. And we've seen some other reports that if there was expendable income, people would cut travel, they would cut restaurant eating, but they wouldn't cut their gym memberships. So there is like a devotion to the industry and to their habits, which I think is really positive and really encouraging. And I think those were early trends that we saw. And now this is the report that reflects all those numbers.
In the report, and tying into your last comments there, it mentions gyms as these third places, and I guess if partly I guess the reason for the change from the name from IHRSA to now maybe the Health and Fitness Association. I remember speaking to you about this a number of years when this came out, but it's almost like redefining what the health and fitness industry is. When you use the terminology third spaces, what does that mean in relation to sort of square foot allocation of some of these operators? Because there's now certainly a difference to what there was in 10 years ago. Like just even on the fitness side, we're seeing some big shifts in terms of how people are prioritizing things like strength training, which is referenced, but also now we're seeing all this almost like this move to what you would typically see in a spa facility, where you have massage and you have some facilities now that are moving into things like IV, providing peptides. Like it's really becoming a very different space, and how to define that is quite different. And within those businesses, there's probably subsections that are being very successful and other things that are dropping off. So coming back to my question, how do some of these changes and these areas of success relate to what you're seeing people allocate, floor spaces to in terms of some of the services?
So what I would say to that is I think we've seen a real rise in two major categories, and that's both the HVLP category as well as the luxury high-end category. So those ones are growing the fastest. Obviously, luxury high-end, more square footage. People are bringing in all kinds of different modalities. I do think that there has been more of a shift back to strength away from cardio. I think that's going to be an interesting pendulum because that does swing back and forth, but we're seeing a lot of investment going toward that in both the HVLP and luxury high end. And like I said earlier, the different modalities of recovery are being brought in many, many interesting ways. And I think we're going to continue to see a growth of that in a significant way.
It's really a reimagination of the space. And I've got a few comments here. Strength, to your point, is about, I think, 42% of the total floor area. Cardio is a little bit down. Recovery and wellness zones are exploding, right? And there's so many new types of this, which we've seen. So I think wellness has become the new anchor. So when you think about, some clubs before were looking at fatigue as an anchor, I think wellness is now what really people are looking at as an anchor. And if you think about this, we've all been in the industry for a long time. Actually, Liz and Anton, maybe both of you are newer. Matthew, you've been here for decades, but I remember 10 years ago when we were talking about recovery, that was an upsell. Recovery was an upsell. Now it's the expectation when you go, and to your point, just seeing it in HVLP and also premium. Then you see Lifetime investing $100 million in pickleball and recovery. Equinox has partnered with Function Health. Yesterday, totally off topic, but my flight was diverted from Sydney to Brisbane because of bad weather. So I ended up going to check out a gym that Matt and I have been talking about for a while called Total Fusion. And let me tell you, talk about a third space. It is incredible. I've never seen anything like it. It blends Equinox with the Remedy Place. It's recovery at the forefront, and it's something that I've never seen before. So I think consumers are really redefining what quote unquote a health club means. And it's not right now, it's not just about lifting weights or doing some cardio. It's about physical and mental community all combined. And it's to go even further, I don't think it's about getting the six pack anymore. Yes, that would be great, but it's about lifespan and health. But these are the that are happening. So I think we are at this stage now where the gym is really becoming that third space, and the consumers want that. I think operators are evolving for it. Membership types and programs are reflecting that. So this is it's a transformation that I think we've been wanting for a long time and is now finally here.
I think that we've got a great opportunity to even dig deeper down and track even that more specifically, because we know people, when they're going into these gyms, are they going straight to the stretch lab? Are they getting on a treadmill? Are they lifting weights? I think we have some opportunity partnering with the wearable community, et cetera, as to say, how are people using these different modalities and what is growing? We know uniformly it's all growing, but I think that we're going to see some really interesting trends. I'll just say something though, and this came up at a recent conference I was at, that we as in this industry, when we use the word recovery, I think we all know what that means. But still, I think if you search recovery, you get drug rehab centers. So I think we've got some work cut out for us to do some more defining of what that recovery sector really is and what that means moving forward. But this is all part of, again, what we understand as the industry, but maybe not quite, beyond our borders, I think, just yet.
I didn't think of that, and we've talked about this quite a lot in a number of podcasts where this broad term recovery seems to mean so many things, but what does that mean to the end user, and are they understanding or buying it? And that, that's probably something that definitely needs some work. It sort of leads into my next question, which is, if you look at the average revenue per member, and although it doesn't necessarily provide this in the report, you could sort of roughly work this out. And as an example, if you look at, I've sort of broken it down into three categories, which is premium, which referred to where there's some significant investments being made and significant revenue increase that's being made at the top end. And if you look at it, if you average it out over a year, it's between $1,500 and $1,700 on the premium end. In the midsection, it's around about $400 to $600 per year per member, and then on the HVLP, it's somewhere in from 60 to 300 per year. And I was just interested to get your thoughts, because there's definitely seems as though there's a lot of opportunity on the upside in terms of the existing membership base, and that's to go from providing a real basic service where you're essentially renting equipment, which is a section of the market that seems to be doing really, really well, but is certainly restricted by that price point. And my guess is that there's a lot of pressure on the cost side, whether that's through labor, whether that's through building new facilities, energy, for et cetera, are all increasing. So it would seem as though, particularly in some of the more developed markets like parts of Europe and the United States, that there is going to come to a point where we're going to be fairly limited to some of the expansion, and I think we're starting to see this slowdown now. I think that's definitely having an impact on some of the manufacturers now, because a lot of the growth on their business is from remodels and refits as opposed to new club openings. So I was just interested in your views. How much of a focus should we be putting now in terms of increasing the value of that member, and that's not only the value to the operator, but also providing more value to the member, because clearly a lot of people that are going into many of these facilities have very little knowledge about what they should be doing, what they should eat, how they should train, how going to a gym would apply to different people at different stages in their life, men, women, etc. And so I was curious to get your thoughts, probably to both of you really, on that particular subject. What are your thoughts on, as an industry, we should be focusing on, and is this good news for the industry if we can find some ways of increasing value to the business owner as well as the members that are coming into these facilities?
So what I'd say to that is I think we have a lot of work to continue to recruit trainers and group exercise instructors. I'm hearing from around the world how difficult and challenging it is to continue to grow that. And that is such a entry point for a new gym user. And we've seen that when you have a trainer or a group exerciser, you're more educated about your workout. You're more educated about how the machinery all works versus somebody that just walks into a gym and may or not really understand even how to use some of the stuff, or maybe they've been using it for a long time the wrong way. So I think that we have an opportunity to work closer with with trainers and to bring more into our industry. But Anton might have a totally different perspective on that.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of points here you could hit on, but I think that's a very good one. For example, again, like going back to the US, where we probably have the most data, right? We see that over the past couple of years, so past 5 years, like there's a marked increase in to what extent like members engage with both personal training and small group exercise, right? Small group training. So we've gone from, back in 2019, 15% of members had taken PT sessions in the past year. Last year, that was 23%. Similarly, when it comes to small group, that went from 28% to 32% in that 5-year period. However, at the same time, we see that the average number of sessions that these people take each year has been going down. And we think that one of the leading reasons is that because there is just a shortage of staff and professional trainers, right, to kind of help them and meet the demand that's out there. So I think it's there's a lot of work to do there to kind of meet that untapped demand, and that's obviously like a potential growth area when it comes to kind of revenue per member as well.
Just to follow up on that, do you think that probably as an industry we need to be doing a better job at are making it more appealing for new people to come in, and also people that have been in industry for a while. Because I don't think it's necessarily news, but a lot of people that were probably working within facilities before the pandemic and were forced to go out and create, whether that's online businesses or set up in their own garage or home or go to people, they've probably realized that there's a lot more opportunity running their own business than working with some of these brands. Now, I think some of the premium ones are set up slightly different, where that makes more sense. But I think as you come down the price point, it's less interesting to see that as a career path that you'd probably want to do. So what are your thoughts on that? And is that comment true in terms of how you're seeing it? And if it is true, what could we be doing to bring more people in?
What I would say about that is that if we're going to get to the next 5%, to get those people off the couch, it can't be an intimidating situation. If those people have never been to a gym, they are very unlikely to go to a gym unless we make it achievable and we make it fun. And I think with that, I think that it's some of the modalities that are embracing sport, because you do see people that are active in gyms having a history of being athletic through sports. I think sport is a great gateway drug to going to the gym on a more regular way. So I think that we need to be not an intimidating place. It needs to be a welcoming place with achievable results for those people that are coming into the gym, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. I don't think that, we don't have a problem with those that are coming the 5, 6, 7 days a week. Those are self-motivated, self-starters, and we love those folks too. But if we're going to continue, to your point, Matthew, to get to this next percentage, that's what I would be doing if I was running a gym.
Yeah, and kind of just to add as well, so, obviously when it comes to attracting, the best trainers out there, like it is also, very important, right, to make sure you can it's an attractive marketplace, like an attractive workplace. So, just take the opportunity to plug here that we are currently conducting a new employee compensation and benefits survey, where we're asking operators basically to submit anonymized compensation and benefits data that will help the industry really benchmark and see where we are at how we structure our staffing and compensation and benefit structures, because ultimately this whole conversation has to start with data, and maybe I'm biased in my role if I'm saying that, but I would certainly encourage all of your listeners to participate and contribute to that initiative by taking this survey.
Well, speaking of data, something that really brought me into this industry is wearables. And I really felt like wearables could play a major role in bringing forward more people. And one of the things I've always said is what is measured is managed. And I go back to this Ghent study, which I'll be talking about at the conference today, that kind of looked at just steps and having a goal with steps, tying to wearable and bringing in community, and how transformative that is to pulling people into a healthier lifestyle. And in the report, I was really encouraged to see that wearables are the #1 global trend in 2025, followed by AI personalization. And, we are kind of crossing the bridge right now. I think 64% of Gen Z consumers have used AI fitness tools versus 17%. So I think that transformation of being comfortable with the tools is there. But half of all those users say that data is inaccurate. The true unlock is when you could tie that data to coaching. That's really closing the loop between tracking and behavior. And just pointing to another report, the ABC Wellness Watch report shows that users that use AI are 2.5 times more engaged in their health and fitness journey, but still the majority of consumers worry about privacy. And a lot more of them also have this fear on over-reliance, which we've talked about even with things like ChatGPT. So just be curious to get, looking at one of the more exciting things, to your point, Anton, data, but looking at it in a different way. Also the goal of and the role of wearables. And what do you think as wearables get more broadly applied and consumers get to bring them into the facilities more? what role do you think they could play for our industry?
I mean, we are seeing already, right, that particularly on the premium side, operators are finding new and innovative ways to integrate wearables and user data, like in various ways, like both to engage with their members outside of the facility by taking classes, etc., but also kind of ways to like gamify their experiences within the brick and mortar sites. So I think that's probably something that will trickle down to other segments of the industry over time as well. We typically see kind of like these novel kind of ideas, right? Start with kind of like the more premium end of the spectrum. So I think that's definitely something we are likely to see. I do think like there are some certain things that the industry kind of would benefit from kind of working around. Like, yes, you mentioned the concerns about privacy, but also you said how there are questions about like the reliability of the data, right? And we do kind of struggle a little bit with a lack of standardization, right? Of how we measure data, how different kind of suppliers quantify and measure and report, basic, biometric data, activity measurements. So I think that is, something that we should all kind of strive towards, having more standardization when it comes to that. And I think that would, really catapult the adoption of wearables to another level.
Yeah, and it's something I know, Mo, you and I have talked a little bit about this,
Yes.
right? And the opportunity for standardizing some of this data, right? And then the interoperability of it, right? So how do we make sure that what a ring is reporting is the same as what a watch is reporting, is the same as what a treadmill is telling you? And how do we get sort of all the manufacturers on the same page with that in order to make sure that we have the most accurate message to the end user, to the consumer?
And tying back to the point of our movements, like from being a discretionary spending to really becoming part of people's healthcare delivery. Like if we are to get to a point where you can provide your healthcare provider with your data from your Aura or your Apple Watch or Fitbit, etc., like you really have to have a common language that you can talk to the healthcare provider community with, right? And that starts with standardized data.
I think the real opportunity for our industry, and this is what I've been pushing for over a decade, is to transform the data to prescription. Today, the average member uses 3 apps and sometimes up to 2 wearables, but they still need a coach to interpret it. I mean, a lot of these technologies will give you a program, they'll show you data, but people don't know what to do with it. So I think our industry is at this great position to take our decades of experience and now help consumers say, what do you do with the data? So how can we turn the data into actionable programming? Because otherwise, data is just entertainment, and we're not really changing lives. But sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
I was going to say, we reference exercise is medicine. Well, I think we all recognize the benefit of collaborating with whatever you would call like the medical world, and on so many levels. But it does seem as though being able to, as an industry, being able to sort of demonstrate the effectiveness of what's happening in gyms. I know going back to the days of the pandemic, this was really seemed to be a challenge from what I heard from some of my colleagues in the UK, when it's almost like getting government to support them because the information that they could provide probably wasn't to the level that they needed to. With things like AI and technology and all of the wearable data that's out there, I was just probably curious to ask all of you, including Mo, where do we see this going? Because clearly, the owning that as manufacturers to own that, it's always going to be a little bit biased. And I know there's a number of manufacturers out there that have the ability to report on some of this information, and it's pretty sophisticated. But there's always a feeling that that's a little bit biased. I think the gyms could do that, but that needs to sort of report into something a little bit higher up, so that there's a more of a stronger argument to discuss this with the medical community and governments. So I was just curious, probably for everyone, if you could imagine like what we would need to do, and what would some of the things need to be in place so that data could be used positively for the industry to probably be taken a little bit more seriously than maybe what they are at the moment.
I would have to say, Matthew, and this is based on the conversations I've had with both wearable manufacturers, brick and mortar gyms, technology companies, there needs to be a trust that what we're going to do with this data is very well intended. So what I've been told by many people in that space is that there is a trust to the Health and Fitness Association to give us the data because we only have good motives and intentions to use it. We aren't going to sell it. We aren't going to monetize it. We're going to use it for advocacy purposes. And to your point earlier that you made, getting back to the doctors and the medical community to be able to use it for prescription. So, and then we've got some work to do there, which is being done with the Physical Activity Alliance and some other groups, but is what is actually being prescribed. That's like, then we got to figure out how to measure it. But when a doctor just says exercise 3 times a day, when the doctor doesn't know what that means, to include strength training, to have more specifics, and to have a vital sign that exists that actually communicates what a prescription of exercise looks like, is something that we're working hard to do. I think we're really close to having it. And so once we can get the prescription down, then we can worry about the measuring of it.
I'm sure there's some great technology out there that would allow this to kind of happen and present it. But like where based on what you know, like what could you see that look like, and would that deliver, I guess, what we needed to?
First, I would say that I think in a lot of ways the consumers in this, I guess we just heard so many industries, but the consumers are actually ahead of the industry right now. They're ahead of manufacturers, they're ahead of the industry. So we, in a lot of ways, are playing catch up. We need catch up in compliance. We need catch up in data standards and so on. I will say that we are working on something in partnership with HFA, led by HFA, to really help bring that. And it is multimodal, it's multifaceted, it's multidisciplined in terms of how we look at not only data standards, where the data is getting stored, how the data is being shared. And ultimately, the goal is to integrate data with our healthcare system such that when you go to the doctor for your annual checkup, they're not just getting your vitals at that point, but they're really able to get a perspective on 6 months, 12 months. What have you been doing for the last 12 months? Because something might have happened 6 months ago that isn't reflective of your data today. So we're looking to really change that. I want to shift gears to one thing here as it relates to the report, because I think related to healthcare, and as we're at the intersection of fitness and healthcare, credibility. We've talked about the word credibility now. I think each one of us has mentioned it on this podcast. When I read the HFA Global Report, it is comprehensive, but it's also designed, understandably so, to make the industry look good. So in some cases, it's a bit of a PR report, which is what we need. And that is what trade reports do. But it's also why the medical and scientific communities often hesitate to take us seriously. Our data is self-reported, not peer-reviewed. It's rarely benchmarked against public health research. So compare that to the CDC or NIH studies that are population-based, longitudinal, and could be reproduced. So my question, I think, to you, Anton, starting with you first, given your title, is how do we elevate research methodologies so that HFA's report isn't just industry insight, but it's evidence that stands up to the same room as JAMA, and you talked about you were on the phone with WHO before this podcast recording. How, because that needs to happen, right? In order for us to be taken seriously, it needs to be more than an industry report. It needs to be evidence-based.
Absolutely, I agree, and I mean there's certainly opportunities out there for that. We constantly have conversations with the likes of health economists and other academics on potential projects that can really kind of elevate our arguments and make the connection, for example, between the values of physical exercise and the downstream effect on economic systems and societies at large, right? And so there are opportunities for that. It has been done somewhat in the past. It's also a question of like who we partner with, right? We have the way our association and most associations are set up, right? Like it's not everything can be done in-house, so we have to choose our external partners, whether that's academic institutions and professional researchers, or kind of like in the consultancy space, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be peer reviewed. I think always it kind of depends on the project, but it's something we're always thinking of, like how will what we produce be perceived and received by the audiences that matter. And perhaps historically, like one of our main audiences haven't been kind of like the policymaker or medical community, but as that shifts and has shifted in the past couple of years here under Liz's leadership, that is something that is more and more top of mind for us.
That's the shift that we need, because the US today spends 4.5 trillion on healthcare, and less than 1% of that is spent on prevention. So if you want fitness to be part of healthcare, we need evidence grade data showing a return on prevention. And for 30 years, I mean, just to add to the wonderful work that IHRSA and now HFA is doing and the transformation that you're in, for the last 30 years, we've told stories about participation. That's been our North Star. We want to improve the rate of penetration, the rate of participation. That's been great. And it's worked for us. I think the next decade needs to be about proving impact. Until we publish research that can stand next to NIH data sets, we'll remain advocates and not clinical partners. I know that's going to take time. I know, Liz, a lot of work that you're doing is getting us towards there, but I'm really excited, for that next step. And I think I would put that as a challenge to you both.
I wanted to move on to the PHIT Act. That was obviously something that I think many of us were quite optimistic about. Unfortunately, it didn't go to plan. It's mentioned in the report, and I was just going to maybe spend a moment to get you guys just to sort of explain, what it actually does, what if anything could be done going forward with this, and is there any relevance of something similar to any other markets across the globe, either looking at something similar or sort of making more progress than probably what's been made in the United States?
So in regards to PHIT, what that was going to do would be to allow your health savings accounts to be used towards both gym memberships and youth sports camps. And at the end of the day, there was a cost to it. And so what that meant is by using that, it would take money out of the tax system. So it's a little bit backwards thinking, but that's ultimately what happened with it. And so the PHIT Act is not done, but we've got more work to do to trim it and to trim it back a little bit more to be something more palatable for the very fiscally conservative Republicans here in Washington, D.C. So we've had encouraging conversations with leadership. And so we're already back at it and back to work, kind of, again, literally cutting the fat off the bill wherever we can to make it something that lawmakers can finally get over the finish line.
From an international perspective, are you seeing any other countries across the globe sort of, investigating or making progress on anything that could be similar in any way to that at all?
Yeah. So this is again something that is highlighted in the global report. So one thing we do with this report is that we collect kind of insights from our partner federations, so like the similar associations that's based in other countries, to see like what they've been up to in the past year. And what really comes through in this report is a momentum across multiple geographies and continents, right, where federations are bit by bit, shifting the narrative, right, around physical exercise as preventative healthcare, right. So there are really good stories, like we see, like both in developed markets, like Germany had its quality offensive. We see like in Australia, there's been some momentum as well. North of the border from us, Canada is trying to lobby Parliament there to get exercise classified as a tax deductible expense, like on par with other healthcare expenses. And some Canadian provinces are leading the way and have already instituted tax credits. Over in Europe, we just the other week saw a big win there, where a proposed VAT, so sales tax hike that would have increased the sales tax on fitness expenses from 9 to 21% was defeated through a really effective collaboration there between a number of groups, including an elective and soccer association there and others. So I think in some ways the experience of the pandemic has been a wake-up call, like for the industry across the world, right? To really get our kind of advocacy outfits in shape and to be able to represent the industry in the best possible way, right? And now, a couple of years in, like we're starting to see some real results from that from across the world.
And one thing I'll add, Matthew, is that sometimes just because something doesn't pass, I've seen, I live in the DC area and speak to some of these people, but it's the awareness that was created by HFA the last couple of years. I'm sure, Liz, you will attest to that. The conversation is happening. This is top of mind, and I think you need a lot of bites at the apple to get things actually pushed through. And sometimes winning is actually the process of awareness. And you could see that play out in other areas as well. So I've just seen a much more informed Congress, a much more informed DC as it relates to how they view our industry. Well, look, we are at time. One of the things that we do on this podcast is we like to wrap up with a key takeaway from the episode. So, Liz, I will start with you. Is there a key takeaway from this report, HFA, or anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and I think it's what Anton said, and it's that we are an industry right now that's growing, we are optimistic, and we are transforming. And I think all of those are encouraging to me, and that's my key takeaway, to continue to spread that message far and wide.
Anton.
Yeah, and I would echo that, but also just said that, we are a relative young industry, both globally and in the US, right? Like some 40 years really as a kind of professional and well-established industry. And so we have a long way to go still to kind of achieve our strategic objectives, but the industry is in a great place right now, and we are optimistic going forward.
I think for me, and we talk about this a lot, right? Because we're coming a few years now past the pandemic. I think 2020 was the reset. 2023 was our general rebound, and 25 to me is the redesign. And fitness has really evolved in the last 5 years from being something that consumers view as optional to now being truly part of our societal infrastructure. And the next edge, and this is interesting because we saw a bunch of new treadmills come out this year, but to me, it's not about like the fancier treadmill or the fancy technology. It's really about smarter service design. It's about cleaner data. It's about proof that movement is medicine and really kind of reaching up to the healthcare community to show them that. So I'm just so glad that the industry, I think, is getting the awareness that it has. I love the data that came out of this report, and just kind of thankful for organizations like HFA for doing the work that you're doing. Matthew, how about you?
Just some of the comments that's made from Anton and listening to what we've discussed today reminding me about a conversation that we had earlier this year at Athetech in New York, where there was, I think somebody who was presenting just mentioned how how basic the awareness is of health, fitness, and exercise even within governments. And I think sometimes, I'm not sure whether it was Liz mentioned this, but how we define things within the industry using the word recovery, and how we're sort of a lot of people that have been in the space for a long time are almost on a very, very different level to the general population and governments from around the world, where they're just trying to understand the moving, doing a certain amount of steps, doing some basic things in terms of your nutrition. And it's almost as though as an industry, we are extremely young. And I think sometimes we have to probably simplify the message and get some of the basics working successfully before we sort of really lose people.
Thanks so much for joining. either Liz or Anton, do you want to tell the audience where they can download the full HFA report?
Yes. So please go to healthandfitness.org and you can access the global report and all of our other products right there.
Well, I'm really looking forward to the event coming up. As I always do, it's such a highlight for me to kind of almost, well, not kick off because it's a bit in the spring in 2026. Liz, anything exciting for our upcoming event this year?
Yeah, so registration's open, San Diego, March 16 through 18, and then March 15 will actually be the Hall of Fame event for those that were a part of that last year that supports our foundation. We expect that to be bigger and better than last year, but some new things that we're looking at doing. We're looking at having an innovation alley, so really highlighting new products that are arriving on the scene, and maybe not the same old brands that we've heard of, and so excited about that. And we're looking at potentially some new awards for some of those products and some other things there. So more to come. We're going to continue to make that show evolve and be as diverse as it can be, and reflective of the industry that not only we are today, but the industry that we want to be tomorrow.
Well, from Sydney, Washington, D.C., and Newport Beach, I think that's a wrap. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us on this week's episode of Lifts.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having
Thanks
us.
very much.